Welcome, everyone, to episode 3 of the Manage to Win podcast with Louis Álvarez of Alvarez Technology Group in Salinas, California. Louis, thanks so much for being on the podcast with us.
Oh, my pleasure. I really enjoy working with you guys.
Well, we enjoy working with you too. And I enjoyed listening to the last time you were on this podcast, or on a podcast with us, with the No Bad Bosses podcast. And we talked about a lot of different stuff. You have been in the IT industry for a long time. And one thing that stuck out to me that I really enjoyed listening to your stories of how you and your team often go out into the field and work with all sorts of different companies and businesses, especially farmers. And now you're working with people who grow marijuana in different locations.
That is correct. Yeah. We were part of the, cannabis gold rush here in California. Back in November of 2016, the good people of the state decided that they wanted to legalize what we call adult use, and some places called recreational use, because medical marijuana was already legal in California. And that law went into effect January of 2018. And it's been this, because of the regulatory and compliance issues around cannabis, as well as being uniquely located in Monterey County, which is a hotbed for cannabis growing, we've gotten heavily involved in that. And it's really just another offshoot of our work with agricultural companies, because at the end of the day, we look at the cannabis world as just an extension of the agricultural world. They're just growing a product, a different product, a much more expensive product, but they have some of the same needs and some of the same challenges that any farmer has in terms of, having a system in place to help them manage their growing operation. In the case of cannabis, you have a lot of surveillance cameras that are required, because the state mandates that basically from seed to sell, every cannabis plant and every corner of the cannabis growing operation has to be on video, 7x24, 365.
Wow.
And that video has to be maintained or you have to hold on to it for up to, depending on what area of the facility, up to 6 months. So that equates to a lot of cameras, a lot of technology, a lot of storage.
Why is that, Louis?
Why do they want
who's going to watch 6 months of video of 130 greenhouses or something?
That's a really good question. I think the reason that they want to do it is they want to make sure that there's nothing nefarious going on. So the idea would be, if the authorities get wind of somebody who is violating their permit by sneaking, some of the plants out the back door so they could avoid paying taxes on them, or selling them, in the black market, they want to be able to say, well, we want to see the video of this, 6-month stretch of period. And we want to make sure that wasn't going on. That's the only thing I can really think of, because otherwise it's very, very, very boring video. Not much happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how much can happen? So I think it's funny, Jeff, you start out the podcast. We're not supposed to talk about religion or politics. And, we immediately jump into a political issue of cannabis growing. So it's great stuff. So I'm kind of curious, you built your company, Louis, into this really strong company culture, a great organization. You really are a magnet for top talent, and you keep people a long time. When you went into this issue, I mean, there's different sides of this issue, and some people feel strongly about it. Did it rub any of your employees the wrong way, where they had a little challenge accepting it, or was it kind of just everybody went with the flow because it's just respecting it's another type of grower?
Well, we did have an internal conversation. We brought it up at our company meeting to let our team know we're thinking of getting involved in this industry. How does everybody feel about it? We wanted to make sure that we took people's values and their personal beliefs into account. And if it was something they felt strongly about, we wanted to have that conversation and try to carve out some exceptions if we decided to move forward with them, so that they wouldn't have to be involved if they didn't want to be involved. But we didn't get any pushback. I mean, I think most of the people that we have know the reality of this area and its changing nature, and they're pretty accepting. So and we also talked to a couple of our key clients because we also wanted to make sure that they were okay with it. That they didn't want to be associated with a company that was involved in the cannabis industry. Those are air quotes there. And again, not a lot of concern, just as, they want to make sure that basically the people that were coming to work on their systems weren't high, but, as we said, we're not using it, we're just supporting it. So.
Well, I think, it also brings when people have a concern, that you can discuss that. And the fact that you're open and brought it up, I mean, everybody has to agree that having it illegal wasn't working, kind of like prohibition.
Yep.
Whether this particular approach is going to make the situation better or not, time will tell, and we'll see what happens. But
yeah, we definitely will learn, because California is the single largest market for cannabis in the United States. So by making it legal, I think there's a lot of good things that can come out of it. The fact that it's now a regulated industry means that you have more control over it. There's still, it's going to be a while before they get rid of the black market or the gray market growers that are still out there, growing marijuana in the backwoods of the forest. So it will still be available that way for a while, but eventually I think it'll be a good thing, just because you'll be able to control the market better.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of control on it, isn't there? There's a ton of regulations I've heard in the California market, and I wonder how much that impacts your business practices and the business practices of your clients.
Well, whether we like it or not, regulatory compliance is actually a good thing for IT service providers if they're smart, because that means that there's a lot of, usually when it comes to compliance, there's a lot of technology wrapped around it. I mentioned the surveillance cameras. There's also access control. There's also 7x24 monitoring of those systems, because in order for one of these facilities to remain in operation, those cameras can't go down. And so, for us, those are managed services opportunities, because now we can offer our clients that kind of monitoring that we do for traditional IT infrastructure. We can do that for their security systems. And there's a lot of cybersecurity involved around the work that we do with these cannabis businesses, because needless to say, they're big targets for the bad guys who see them as a source of a lot of money. And so in a way, it's it's a good thing that there's all these compliance requirements, but we had to get smart on it. I mean, that was one of the things that we took upon ourselves as we decided to move into this industry, that we needed to understand what the rules and regulations were around their operations, so that we can provide them with advice, with counsel that made sense. And learning their business has been illuminating, to say the least.
Well, I think that builds on what you said in the earlier podcast in No Bad Bosses. Was we were talking about how you took the leap many years ago to be kind of the first out in the field. Mm-hmm. And doing all this out in the field tech work when it was kind of pioneering work. And the fact that you're reinforcing now, what we're also often working with clients is, hey, you need to get in and know their business, so you're a business advisor, which is what you're saying is what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's huge.
And it's something that we do for all of the industries that we serve, or try to do as best as we can. But especially in agriculture, because their technology use is more apparent out in the field than it is, back in their offices. I mean, they have a traditional network and traditional PCs and servers, those sorts of things, as we all do. But really, where a lot of the most significant technology investments come in are in their operations, whether that's a manufacturing plant, a warehouse where they store product and they need to have wireless systems so that they can use barcoding technology to track their pallets and track down to the box of produce, and making sure that they can make sure that all of that produce stays healthy and isn't exposed to any sort of germs or isn't exposed to heat when it needs to be cooled, that sort of stuff. So learning their operations has really helped us in moving into something like the cannabis industry, because we bring that same knowledge with us. And like I said, because cannabis is just a plant. And so when we're working with some of these cannabis growers, and they're trying to maximize the production, the yield that they get, we can provide them advice on things like, environmental sensors, on water sensors, so they can track the water usage. All of the traditional stuff that we've learned out in the field working with our other ag clients has proved to be beneficial for us and for them.
Well, I bet it's also motivational for your employees too, because they get to show up on site and they are clearly a unique expert. Where it feels good to kind of come in and be able to know things the client doesn't know and your competitors don't know, because you guys have been out there doing it for so long. And that's a real, fulfilling thing, to be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great when you can sit down with, especially in a new industry like this, where there's a lot of people that are getting into it not really knowing the lay of the land, if you will, the rules and the regulations, and we can become their trusted advisor above and beyond just the technology, and they're surprised by our knowledge of the industry as a whole and the things that they need to do that they hadn't really thought about doing, and that gets us closer to them and makes us feel good about the fact that we're helping them just, above and beyond just supplying hardware and software.
Do you have to talk with a lot of unique vendors that might provide products that your clients use out in the field? I can imagine they use some pretty specific equipment to measure certain things.
Well, when we first started working with these guys, and this whole camera thing came out, we didn't do surveillance as a big part of our business. Occasionally we would do a camera for somebody that wanted to do indoor monitoring of maybe an office space or a warehouse, those sorts of things. But as we learned about all of the compliance around cannabis, and the fact that you had to have cameras, that had to have very specific things like frames per second, and storage in a certain type of protocol, a certain type of format, we had to go out and find vendors that did that, because they weren't the vendors that we were working with. And when we started, making those inquiries and talking to these surveillance vendors, they were surprised that we were doing it, because their traditional channel isn't IT. Their traditional channel is, access control companies to, alarm companies, that sort of stuff. And they were very happy that we were getting involved, because they knew that the new technology that was required to adhere to the regulations for the cannabis industry, their traditional reseller channel wasn't going to be able to do it, because it's very data intensive, it's very IP intensive, and these guys are basically low voltage guys. They know how to set up a camera with a coax cable to it. They might know how to set up an IP address on a camera, but doing all the other things that we needed to do in order to make them compliant was something that those vendors were excited about, and they've given us a lot of attention. They want us to be successful, and they as we were learning, going through the learning process, as you can only imagine, as we adopted a new technology, we needed a lot of hand-holding, and they were there to help us through that process. And then we were able to bring in some of the vendors that we had worked with in traditional ag, that were doing things like soil, sensors, environmental sensors, those sorts of things that the cannabis industry is just trying to figure out. It's a very growing cannabis is a very labor-intensive process, and they're trying to automate, and we're part of that, helping them find ways to automate some of the production, some of the growing of the product.
When did you first get into the out in the field type technology stuff, Louis?
That goes back about 10 years now. And it started when we were getting these requests. So we because of where we're located in Monterey County, it's a very agricultural intensive area, lots of fresh vegetables grown here, all your broccoli and all your lettuces. And, unfortunately, we make the news for bad reasons sometimes when there's a romaine problem or a lettuce problem. But a lot of those farmers that we support would be calling us and saying, hey, we're deploying this new thing out in the field, so we need 10 IP addresses. And we're like, well, what is this thing, and why are you deploying it? And very quickly we realized that we were missing out on opportunity, because we were focused on just the data center. We were focused on helping the people in the office do the traditional IT stuff that they would do, making their PCs work right and make sure the printer's printed and those sorts of things. But the real investment was happening out in the field, and those decisions were being made not by the owner or the office manager. They were being made by the people that worked in the field, the foremen and the forewomen, the plant managers, the warehouse managers. And we said, hey, we got to start talking to those folks. We got to know what's going on there, so that we can help them better. It wasn't about trying to control the process. It was more about, let's not come in at the end of the installation when they're ready for IP addresses. Let's be part of the conversation early on, so that we can lend our advice and make sure that we understand what the requirements are, and that there's no surprises when when this vendor shows up to try to install something. And the more we did that, the more acceptance we got from our clients who were in those, in that ag industry. They started to look to rely on us and lean on us when they came to deploying new technologies. And rather than calling us at the end of the process, they would call us at the beginning and say, hey, I've been approached by this vendor who says he can sell me the latest and greatest sensor that's going to make my yields improve by 100%. And I just want you to be involved in that conversation to make sure that I'm not making a mistake. And that's when we knew that we had finally gotten to where we wanted to be.
How many years did that take?
It took probably two to 3 years of active work on our part. We would it wasn't going to happen by evolution. It was one of those things where we had to be very proactive about reminding our clients during QBRs, for example, hey, if you're implementing any new technologies, even if it's out in the field, even if you're doing something that you don't think needs to involve us, just let us know. We want to make sure that there's not going to be any issues that might come up later. And the more we introduced that question or that concept into our QBRs, the more frequently they would start responding and saying, well, now that you bring it up, yeah, we're thinking of putting in these new tractors that are automated and require GPS positioning and maybe some Wi-Fi. Is that something you guys can help us with? And we'd say, yeah, absolutely. Let us talk to that tractor company and see what we can do to help you and make it more efficient and more effective for you.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, when you made this shift and you said, okay, we're going to start going out in the field, we're going to start, going where this change has happened. Did you had some employees that kind of balked and didn't want to go in that direction? If I'm remembering correctly, it wasn't a large number, but there were
a few that didn't make the transition. They were more enamored with the traditional IT world. They wanted to work on Cisco routers and sonic wall firewalls and servers and workstations and not get their boots on and go out in the field and help somebody who's trying to figure out how to use a brand new tractor that's GPS enabled that needs to have sensors implanted in the four corners of the field in order to work correctly. They're like, yeah, that's not what I do, And so, fortunately, the vast majority of the people that work for us are excited about these new opportunities. About they're constantly trying to learn things and be smarter. And we all know that the traditional IT world is changing. Cloud is now become a much bigger part of our the support that we provide our clients as we move them off of the traditional on-prem platforms to cloud-based platforms, and that's a whole different set of skills that you need, because you're not putting together hardware anymore. Now you're working on software defined WANs, and you're working on Azure, and you're working on Office 365, and those take different skill sets.
Yeah, and for anybody in our audience not familiar with the acronym QBR's quarterly business reviews, when Louis and his team go in there and basically review what's going on with technology and what they see coming up, and be business advisors, not just tech advisors. So, Jeff, I think one of us needs to put this in a newsletter or a blog, this whole concept of, identifying and telling kind of a summary of this story that Louis and his team identified this opportunity within their market where something was totally changing, and, going out in the field. And rather than say, oh, no, that's not our deal, they jumped in on it. And within 2 or 3 years, then they started to become a go-to partner. And now after 10 years, that's really got to put you in a unique position in your whole market. So,
we think so. We think it's a huge differentiator. We just had our annual planning session for 2019 at the end of December, and one of the we go through the whole SWOT, strength, weaknesses, opportunity, threat analysis, and one of our strengths was the fact that we are doing something like this. We think that nobody else is doing. Our competitors aren't doing this sort of stuff. So that opens us up to a lot more opportunity within the agricultural community as a whole, and we have a really good reputation there.
I'm just happy that you explained what QBR means. I thought qualitative business review. I was really close.
Yeah, you're close.
Really close. You're very close, sir. Very close.
I almost got this. Well, I'm actually interested, Louis, in what you think about that transition from the transitioning to the cloud, where it used to be all on premise, and now everything's in the cloud. And I'm particularly concerned with how you guys feel about the control has changed from the more local control with each client. Perhaps you guys had more control working with the client there, to there's more global control from the vendor. Office 365, you give a lot of control and power to Microsoft. And how do you guys feel about that?
Well, it's, in some cases you feel a little apprehensive about it, because especially I'm less concerned with a company like Microsoft than I am with a smaller company that says, hey, we're going to take our on-prem software and we're now going to force you, Mr. Customer, to subscribe to our cloud-based solution, that you have no choice, because we're going to stop the on-prem stuff. And those smaller companies tend to be less transparent and tend to be more controlling than, let's say, a Microsoft is. We have a lot of, even though it's in the cloud with PowerShell and some of the other tools that Microsoft makes available, we have a lot of control of how Office 365 works, and a lot of visibility into some of the more esoteric aspects of Office 365 if we want to go there. But when you have a customer that's using an ERP platform, for example, and they're moving that software to the cloud, and that cloud vendor that they're working with, or that software vendor that they're working with, doesn't want to talk to you about, how do you do backups? How do we make sure that if there's a disaster, that the client isn't going to be hurt? What are your SLAs when it comes to those sorts of things, your service level agreements? And a lot of them are reluctant to share those, or don't even have any. They're new to this cloud business, and they're trying to take advantage of this move to the cloud that they see. And those smaller vendors are the ones that present the biggest challenges for us. But as a whole, we recognize that this is the way the industry is going. It's the trend that continues to expand and grow, and we're just going to have to figure out a way in our ecosystem, to provide the best support that we can for our clients.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Jeff.
As an end user, I've struggled with the thought and the notion of going in this cloud direction. I don't use iCloud, but I can see now with using Office 365 how beneficial it is. I have all my contacts things synced through there. I have all my email, all my calendars, everything, and it's actually working really well, and I'm enjoying it. But one of the things that I struggle with is giving up that power. Giving up that control over everything, and knowing that a lot of it was probably already sitting on somebody else's servers, to begin with. But now the possibility is expanded that all of my data is somewhere, and that some,
big brother's watching you.
Yeah. And also, big brother's, nephew engineer sitting there who might be really upset because his boss just, lowered his salary or did something that pissed him off, might go into my stuff just for whatever reason. I'd be curious, what's your take on that?
Well, remember a few weeks ago, there was a report out that the company Ring, they're the doorbell people, that let you see who's coming to the door from wherever you're at in the world, that sort of thing. Well, there was a report out that their office in Romania, I think it was, someplace in Eastern Europe, that the engineers there could look at anybody's camera at any time and look at all the recordings at any time. And, as it turned out, Ring denied it. And Ring is an Amazon company, by the way. And so they vehemently denied it and said, there's no way this, the data is completely partitioned and nobody can see it except whoever owns the data. But when that came out, I got a few phone calls from clients who said, "Hey, I told you this cloud thing is all a scam." This is why I never want to go to the cloud, because there's, these guys that are out there that are going to be spying on me or getting into my data or, doing all sorts of stuff. And there are some legitimate concerns. One of the biggest pushbacks that we get, for example, is from attorneys. And the reason they push back is because, the Patriot Act in the United States allows law enforcement to issue these secret subpoenas for data. And the hosting companies have to comply without notifying the end user that they're turning over all this data to the United States law enforcement without your knowledge. And lawyers are super concerned about that sort of stuff. So they're like, nope, I want all my data on premise, because that way at least I have to come to my door with a subpoena if they want to get my records. I mean, I still have to provide them, but I'll know I'm providing them as opposed to not knowing. So we get lawyers who are lawyers talking about that sort of stuff. And CPAs are another breed of people that we do a lot of work with accounting companies, and they're concerned about putting their records in the cloud because they're confidentiality and those sorts of things. So we provide them a lot of documentation, some of it from the vendors like Microsoft or Amazon that says, no, we don't get into your data, we can't see it, it's all encrypted, and you're the only one that holds the key. But then you get this, a story like Ring that comes out, and it just scares the masses and reinforces the fears and the apprehensions that they have. So it's a challenging issue, and I don't think it's going to go away. But one of the other things that we're seeing in terms of that dynamic is we're seeing a lot of the baby boomer generation retire and turning over their businesses to younger people, and those younger people tend to not be as concerned. They grew up in a world where they were on Facebook, and they were very, they didn't hide anything. And so the idea that somebody's going to get into their stuff in the cloud is like, yeah, and so what? We don't care. It's not that big a deal. So I think
that Ring thing was on the internet. Everything on the internet is true. So it's
That's true. Absolutely.
Yeah. Everything I read on the internet is. The other piece I'd like you to pick up on, for our audience to pick up on, Jeff, is if you read between the lines a little bit what Louis is saying is, like with Office 365, it's a total business model change for a managed service provider like Alvarez Technology Group. However, by jumping in the way they have, Microsoft, puts out good stuff. But to be candid, speaking for myself, a lot of the Office 365, you look at Teams or you look at Planner or some of the other things, they're kind of half-baked at best.
Oh, yeah.
They are basically a starter pack that's missing a lot of feature functionality. And so it actually, when you, instead of dismissing it, or as an MSP, IT managed service provider, you basically install it and do nothing else, that's a problem.
It is.
You're not really providing the service. Whereas what I'm reading between the lines, correct me if I'm wrong, Louis, but you guys are actually taking a proactive approach where you're providing the advice. You go in this direction. Here's what really works well. Here's what works okay, and here's what you shouldn't do yet, because that's just kind of put out there, but it's not there.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, as the world has changed, we've had to change the way that we approach and our clients and the kind of advice that we give them. So to your point, when somebody decides to deploy Office 365, they get this huge tool chest of stuff, right?
Yeah.
There's all of these different components to Office 365. And most MSPs, all they do is they say, well, here's Outlook, here's the Office suite, you're done. And all of these other things just go unused. Microsoft wants you to they pay attention to partners who know the value of the entire stack and are willing to spend time with their clients to show them. So when we deploy Office 365, we always install Teams, for example. It used to be Skype for Business, now we do Teams, because we think that collaborative nature of instant messaging and creating these ongoing chats is very, very powerful. And once you show people how to use that tool, you change their lives. Like we tell our clients, once you start using Teams, the amount of email that you send and receive to your internal team will go down by at least 50%, because you're going to be using a much better way to communicate than sending somebody an email and waiting for them to respond. And, it's like that old adage of somebody sends you an email, then walks over to your office and says, "Hey, did you get my email?" And you're like, well, since you're here, tell me what the email is about. No, read the email, then respond. I'm like, what? But that's,
get out of my office.
Exactly. So the using something like Teams and being able to show a client how collaboration can change their business, can really expand and make them more successful, is something that we enjoy doing, because we think it makes us stickier with those clients. It makes them believe that we're working in their best interest, and we're showing them to use things that they might not necessarily use. Now, do we go into Planner and all of the other stuff that they have? Not if they don't need it. I mean, some of that stuff is just nice to have. And to your point, some of it is still kind of in development. It's a beta product that Microsoft threw into the stack and said, "Hey, you guys help us figure this one out."
Basically, we only have $1 trillion in the bank, so we can't do it. We need your help. Hey, Jeff, I'm getting kind of technology bogged down here. What do you got on your list there? Questions? It's leadership or culture or breakout things that Louis is seeing.
Well, Louis, I know works with a lot of nonprofits and also serves on a few boards of nonprofits. I think we'd love to hear about that and how you got into that.
Well, early on in our life as a company, and we're this company is turning 19 next month. So we've been around for a while, and prior to that, I was a partner in another company that we sold for almost 10 years. So to David's point, I've been around a long time for a guy as young as I am. And
you started when you were 6.
I started when I was 6, yeah. But I decided that we, as part of our values as an organization, needed to give back. That had to be a fundamental, brick in the foundation of our company, and it has to start at the top. And so I got involved with, even at the beginning, where I knew I didn't have a lot of time, because I was working really hard. I was hustling. I was a working engineer. I was out in the field a lot. But even then, I wanted to participate in things that I could participate in. And so I joined Rotary and got exposed to what a community-focused organization can do. If you put together a room full of really smart, capable business people, you can accomplish quite a bit. for your community as a
Can you
whole.
expand on what Rotary does? I'm not intimately familiar with them.
Rotary International is a service group. It's, they're like Lions or, the Moose Lodge. There's a bunch of these service groups out there. Rotary was one founded in Chicago about 102 years ago, 103 years ago, by a business person. And his idea was that as a business community, they should get together and work to improve the community at large. They're in this case Chicago, and so it's spread all over the world. It's an international organization. Something like 2.5 million people are members of Rotary, and the clubs are spread throughout the country. Many cities like Salinas, for example, we have 4 clubs because they're sometimes the clubs get too big and people want to have a smaller club, a more intimate club. And our club is involved in a number of community efforts, helping. For example, we used to do an annual international mission to I'm trying to remember what country. I think it was Honduras, to help with cleft palates. So we would work with local physicians who would, for a week, get on a plane, go down to Honduras. Our club would volunteer people who would go down there, paying their own way, so that they can help set up the tents and set up the equipment, those sorts of things. We do water projects internationally. Locally, we do a number of we work with a number of local nonprofits to help them, whether they're kids groups or helping homeless in Salinas. So Rotary really opened my eyes to the power of giving back. And so it's been a fundamental tenet for me. And I've, been on the board of the local Red Cross chapter. I've been on the board of, more fun places like the Monterey Jazz Festival. I was a board member for 10 years there. I'm a board member of several business advisory groups in local colleges. So CSU Monterey Bay is a 4-year college that I'm on their advisory council, and Hartnell College is a community college that I'm involved in. And I do that, quite frankly, for very selfish reasons. I want to make sure that we're producing the future engineers and technicians and people that I can hire. And I want to influence those programs to make sure that they continue to focus on the type of skill sets that we need as a business community. And they're just not turning out, academically capable people, but who've never really experienced, the real world. So, and so giving back is something that's fundamental to me, and I've made it something that's fundamental to our team. We encourage all of our employees to get involved. We give them time off if they need it to, within reason, to get involved and be involved. We do things like Relay for Life, which is an annual event that raises funds for cancer research, because we've all been touched by cancer. I mean, I think every one of us has knows somebody or has met somebody who's gone through cancer treatment, and we know that sometimes that's a very expensive and very painful process, and we want to do what we can to help them. We're involved with the local SPCA. A couple of my people are involved in that organization, but also goes even to some of our employees' Little League teams. We support them. We provide them funds for uniforms and things like that, because it's important to our employees, and what's important to them is important to me. And like any business, we probably get approached by 100 organizations every year looking for donations for really good causes, but we have a finite amount of resources, so we can't give to everything, and we have to decide how are we going to dish it out, if you will. And we decided that the best way is start within. So the causes that are important to our team and our employees, we give first. Then we also support those nonprofits who are clients of ours, because if they're trusting us to manage their technology, then we have to be willing to give back to them and support, their causes. If it's sponsoring an event or contributing to a fund that they want us to contribute to the extent that we can, we do all those sorts of things. But it's all about giving back, and it's about supporting the community that supports us.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's really great. And one thing that stuck out to me, and you just said that maybe that's what has really helped you be a leader and develop the business at Alvarez Technology Group. Your statement was, "What's important to them is what's important to me."
Yeah, it has to be that way. I mean, and if you want to be a good leader, if you want to be somebody who goes to bed at night saying, "Hey, I did the best that I could," you have to keep the interests of those people around you top of mind. You can't be selfish, but you have to be I always believe that to be a good leader, you have to be the most selfless person in the room. You have to be willing to do everything you can to support everybody else in that room. If not, then you're shortchanging yourself as a leader, and you really need to be more introspective about how you can help others.
Well, I think also this reinforces, three strands leadership that I teach, that, when you support a cause that's important to an employee, you're showing that you value them, you're showing sincere gratitude, and then you're connecting them to meaningful work in your organization. I want to work for this organization because they care about me and they care about the causes that are important to me.
Yeah, we
So
like to
I think those are links. So what else you got, Jeff? Otherwise, I got a question.
Oh, why don't you go ahead? You got a question? Fire away.
So I'm just curious, Louis, you're coming off of your 2019 meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You're coming off, I'm sure, another strong year of performance for your company. And you work with some pretty significant, you're talking in general growers down there in the Salinas Valley. Some of those people are uber growers. Those are very large companies. You're connected with a lot of significant players near Silicon Valley or in Silicon Valley. And I'm curious, when you think of the people that you work with, what do you see as some of the attributes, some of the things that, just a few examples of things that people are doing that kind of knock it out of the park, where they do one thing as a leader that's like hits you and you're just like, wow, I may do that now, but I should do more of it, or you're seeing this huge impact. I know, like, I had a buddy of mine go down, and what is it? Is it more? I think they're farther south than you. They got like 4,000 employees or something like that, and they have like no management layer. It's a bizarre thing, but I don't want to go down there. I'm interested in what you might be seeing that really struck you as, wow, I can see how this has a major impact on how this person, the impact this person has as a leader, or on their employees' culture or the growth of their company type of thing.
Well, I'll give you a broad example of the agricultural industry as a whole, because, people who don't, when you think of ag, you don't necessarily think of the people that run these companies. And, some of these companies are generational. You look at one of my good friends, Rick Antle. His company, Tanamura and Antle, is a grower in the Salinas Valley, and it's the joining of two families: the Tanamuras, a Japanese family, and the Antles, who came from the Midwest. And their partnership started in the early 1920s, way before World War II. But during World War II, the Tanamura family were interned, and they were gone for 2 years. And the U.S. government tried to take away their properties, take away their holdings, because that's it's a bad time in our history. But the Antles stepped up and said, no, you're not going to do that. And they took over all of those properties, paid the government for them, and then when the Tanamuras were released, they gave them back to them. And they said, no, you're still a partner in this firm. You've never not been a partner. And that tradition, that solid value of trust and support permeates the Salinas Valley. And you see it in in efforts like, the housing problem in California is no big secret, and it's difficult to find affordable housing. So a lot of these ag companies have stepped up and are building affordable housing for their workers. And it's kind of like that old, company town mindset where they're providing housing and at affordable rents, but they're making the investments. They're the ones that are paying for these apartments to be built because they need to support their people and they need to support the future generations. So they provide a lot of money to local colleges for special programs to benefit the children of their employees. And to me, that's that kind of example of taking care of those that make you great is key to success. They recognize that it's not about the farmland. It's not about the produce. It's about the people that work the land. It's about the people that come to work every day, rain or shine, literally, and do their jobs. And they need to support those people, and they're an inspiration to me.
Yeah, it's about the relationships.
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely, it's about the relationships.
And if you take care of the relationships, it's like when we talk about providing this awesome client experience. I want to wow my clients, etc. You never get there if your employees are unhappy.
Oh yeah,
or you don't feel that they're valued. If your employees feel they're valued and they're doing meaningful work, then they can wow a client. But otherwise, it's just not going to happen. There's going to be too many gaps.
One of the happiest moments of when I go out and meet with clients, and I try to go out and meet with clients all the time because I'm not out in the field like I used to be. But I think it's important for me to be out there and talk to them and say, hey, tell me how we're doing. But it's when they say to me, you have great people. I love working with your people. That I come back and I just immediately communicate to our team. If they speak of a specific person, then I go talk to that person and say, hey, I was over on talking to the folks of the food bank, and they said you're a rock star, and they couldn't survive without you. So thanks for representing us well. Because it's all about our people. It's not about me. It's not about Alvarez Technology Group. It's about the people that are out there interacting with our clients and the impression they leave behind. So I want to make sure that inside the four walls of our building, we're building a culture that makes those people want to go out and represent us well, and carry the values that we have internally out into the field when they interact with our clients.
And Louis, I'm curious, you said you don't go out into the field as much as you used to. It sounds like you did a lot before, but now how often do you get out there? I mean, how often are you getting your hands dirty?
Well, the nice thing is I get to pick and choose, right? So totally. Any interesting projects I get first dibs on, but the guys don't like me to get involved quite as much. I mean, they come to me for advice and they know that I'm smart and capable, but they like to solve the problems on their own. But I would say I probably now spend less than 20% of my time actually out, working, getting my hands dirty, as you said. And most of that really is about higher level consulting with clients, helping them, in kind of as a quasi CIO, helping them talk about technology and plan for the future and look at what they should be doing versus what they're doing now. And the fact that I've been doing this for a long time, and I know have a long history in the technology world, gives me a little bit of perspective, so I can lead them hopefully in the right direction and not steer them to a lot of shiny fancy things that they don't necessarily need.
I think that's great because I've noticed in just reading about different CEOs and different big businesses, how a lot of the CEOs and leaders that I've learned about that I admire often go straight to the source, go straight to the front lines and start learning about the business immediately. For instance, when Boeing CEO Alan Mulally was hired by Ford, I don't know if he was CEO at Boeing, I can't remember, but he was hired by Ford, and he started putting together the One Ford plan. I believe one of the things he did was he went down to speak with the people that are actually building the cars. He went down to these deeper levels of the business to get he wanted to get a good feel for what was actually going on. And you see a lot of business leaders that get too removed from that forget about the frontline work, that forget about what it actually takes to run the business in the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah, I think Mihaly was CEO of Boeing, but one of the funny stories I heard of him was early on, he went and he participated in a Consumer Reports review of one of the early versions of the Edge.
The Ford Edge.
Yeah, and Consumer Reports was ripping it to shreds.
Ooh.
And his engineers, instead of listening, were arguing with the Consumer Reports people. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how long he let it go on, but at one point he finally just said, "Hey, I want you to just be quiet and take notes and ask questions. There'll be no more arguing." And being the CEO, of course, they had to do what he said. But, like one of the Consumer Reports people who was testing the car wasn't very tall. It was a woman, wasn't very tall. She couldn't reach and close the back hatch.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah. And she was complaining, and the engineers were trying to argue that it was justified that she couldn't reach it.
Jump.
Yeah. This is an exercise point we have at the car. It's for your health. Yeah.
Carry stepladder with you. Crazy.
That's awesome. That's great. Louis, we also wanted to talk to you about your working relationship with Ronnie, your wife, Ronnie. Am I getting that correct?
You're getting that correct. Yeah.
And you guys have two different personality styles, but you work it together pretty well. How do you guys reconcile the personality differences with, the operations, the day-to-day operations of the business?
We've been doing this now for 19 years together. And before that, she actually worked for my former company, although we didn't work together there. She just was helping out in the sales side of things. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's not super difficult. I mean, we have a profound respect for each other. And we believe that each of us has a specific role to play in the organization, and when we respect those boundaries, I think that's the most important thing that you can do if you're working with your spouse or any family member. It's understanding. Here's your box, here's my box. Let's respect each other in those boxes, and let's collaborate when we need to collaborate. And let's not bring work home to the extent that we can. That's the toughest part, right? Because we've literally for 19 years have been together 7/24 most days. We come to the office together, we go home together, and it's really easy to continue conversations that you started at the office at home. But we try to not do that as much as possible. We try to separate the two, because you need to go home and be husband and wife. You need to go home and be with your mate, and not go home and be with your coworker and say, hey, that thing that happened today at 10 o'clock when we were talking to Elliot, I really want to talk about that some more. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Let's set some time aside tomorrow at work to talk about that, unless it's a critical thing that you got to get something off your chest right now. It's one of those things that actually a lot of my friends marvel at. They say, there's no way I could work with my wife, or I work with my husband as much as you guys do. But we just made it work. We've figured out a way that each of us can do the things that we need to do to make the business successful, and not fight or not kill each other, or not that every day is a good day. There are days when we get frustrated, and there are days when one of us feels like we're not being heard, and we have to we have to have conversations about that at some point. But I would say 90% of the time we really enjoy working together. It's it's fun, and it's good to know what the other person's day is like. That's one of the benefits, right? When you have spouses that work together, there's never a doubt. How'd your day go, honey? Because they were there, they saw it,
Right.
and they understand if you go home and you happen to have a bad attitude because something rotten happened at work, and you just don't want to talk about it, they're going to give you your space. So that's one big benefit of working together, I would say.
You know, what I've observed with the two of you, and I think you brought it up, is this really respect for each other's differences rather than let those differences irritate you. So you guys, respect that. And then my impression, so you need to comment on this because I'm making an assumption because I've never seen you guys in a bad way. But my assumption is that what you guys do when there is that 10% zone, or you're just at odds on something, is you guys never lose sight of the fact that you choose the relationship over whatever the decision is, whatever the situation is.
Yeah,
and that's important. I think that other people, they go to fear or flight mode. Both of those modes abandon the relationship.
Yeah,
one is to win, with the fight, and the other, when you abandon, when you're doing flight, you're saying, I'd rather not get hurt. I'll leave this, but it still abandons the relationship. So, I mean, am I getting that right? That's you guys.
Yeah, no, it is. On those days where we have conflict or where we have disagreements, we want to work through them. We don't want to, let them fester or let them linger, because we know that we're going to have to go to work tomorrow together. It's not like you can just go home and say, thank God I don't have to see her for the weekend. I'll catch up with her on Monday and hopefully things are better. It's like, no, we have an entire weekend to deal with this. So let's just deal with it and get it out of the way. Let's not make it. Let's not turn it into something that it isn't, which is a crippling big deal. This is an issue. We need to talk it through. This too shall pass. So I think that's part of the beauty of having a partner at work and in life who wants to make sure that you don't let things fester.
Yeah, but I think for you, being the extrovert and the problem solver, that's easier for you to come to that that commitment. Okay, well, let's just talk about it. Whereas Ronnie's more the analytical, probably needs to think it through. And so probably you've had to learn to give her some space.
Ooh, yeah. We're going to have Ronnie on to talk about this.
Yeah. Ronnie's great. She's welcome on anytime. But she doesn't want to be on, right?
No, she does not want to be on.
Yeah, no, Ronnie's the introvert, opposites attract.
Yeah, Ronnie's such, she doesn't like being the center of attention so much that when we go to like a comedy show, she wants to sit in the back row where she knows she's not going to get picked on. She doesn't want to be anywhere near the front where the comedian can like point at her and ask her something. So, like she says, hey, I'm paying to watch a show. I'm not paying to be in the show.
That's great. That's funny because my dad is more the extrovert and I'm more the introvert, and I would probably be more on Ronnie's side of things. Yeah. One of my statements in my talent assessment that I highlighted was maintain a distance of 3 feet at all times from Jeff. That's just me. I don't know why. It's just, I just want the space. Like, don't get inside my bubble. Yeah. I imagine you have, you and Ronnie have a number of those things as well that you've learned about each other over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it actually has been good. The fact that we've taken things like talent assessments and DISC profiles, and we read them together, and we compare each other, and we're like, yep, that's who I am, and that's who you are. And there's the one that when dealing with Ronnie, like you pointed out, the 3-foot buffer, right? Here's what you do. Here's what you don't do. And those things have proved helpful. I mean, it's really been an important thing to recognize that we are two different people and we have two different ways of dealing with things. And with Ronnie, you do have to, give her some space. She is more deliberate than I am. I'm a very high I in the DISC profile, which means I'm very out there and extroverted, and she's very a very high C, and so she, yeah, and so she likes things done her way, and I have to
the right way.
I have to adapt myself
right.
to that, because it's not in my nature. And conversely, she understands that I'm, the guy who likes to be at the head of the table and likes to be in charge. And she lets me pretend to do that for a while until she decides it's no longer, no longer necessary. And then she takes over like she normally does.
I'm on your side, Ronnie. I'm rooting for you. Well, is there any advice that you have for leaders, Louis, that we should wrap up on? It sounds like you've been through a heck of a lot, and you have some really great experience.
Well, my number one advice to anybody who's in a leadership role or looking to be a leader is never stop growing. Never stop thinking. Well, never think that you've seen it all and done it all. Because the world is a dynamic, changing place, and it provides a lot of lessons to those who are willing and desire to learn. And I'm always learning. I'm always growing, I'd like to believe, and I'm always adjusting who I am, because the world around me is changing and growing. And as leaders, we need to know that, it's not the millennials, and it's not, Generation X. It's not Generation Z. These are all people, and yeah, they're going to be different than you, because everybody's different than you. I always say that one of the worst pieces of advice that you can ever give somebody is, adhere to the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Because I don't want to do unto. A lot of people may not want me to treat them the way I want to be treated. That's not who they are. You need to recognize that the world is evolving, and you need to, as a leader, evolve with it and never stop growing and never stop learning.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think if you look back at the actual story where that golden rule came from, some people refer to it as the platinum rule, because actually the teaching was treat people the way they want to be treated.
And that I agree with.
Yeah. And that's what works. So I think it's a good place to end, Jeff. I mean, unless you want to go somewhere else.
I agree. We can wrap it up. Thanks so much, Louis, for being with us. I'll stop the recording here shortly. And hopefully we can have you on again sometime in the future.
Anytime. We can touch base in a little bit after this cannabis thing gets a little bit more mature, and we'll see where it's at.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Sounds great. Thanks, Louis. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.